Thanksgiving dinner isn't just about the several helpings of delicious, nap-inducing food. It's also about those sometimes awkward conversations with extended family at the dinner table. But with a few tips from my next guest, those money conversations don't have to be so painful. Joining me now, we've got Valerie Galinskaya. She is the head of the Merrill Center for Family Wealth. Great to have you here with us today. You know, as we think about some of those money conversations that the family table and the dinner table may be having, where should perhaps it kick off? What's a safe entry point?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be with you, Brad. You know, for us, a lot of the unintended consequences or the awkwardness that can come from conversations is when they're not planned, right? When there's not a lot of thought given to intent. So for us, whether the conversation is around gifting or some uncomfortable kind of, question from maybe an extended family member or a nuclear one about what someone's plan is, having a sense of intent and also an elevator speech ready, we found to be incredibly helpful.
And so with that in mind, let's walk through some of the scenarios that might play out. And I know that there are a lot of friends, some people in our newsroom, myself, other people who are making their way, traveling, perhaps meeting families for the first time and trying to say, hey, this is what we've been working on. This is what we've been navigating through. And it's great to meet you all. And here's the financial future we're preparing for as well. How do you start those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So to the point of elevator speeches, when we surveyed over 300 ultra high net worth families, and we actually asked them directly, have you regretted talking about money with a family member? 26% of them said I have. When we dug deeper, again, we found that 78% of those respondents said it was because it was spontaneous. So in terms of practical tips, if the conversation, for example, is around gifting, right? And there was a gift made and it feels, for example, there's some gray around intent or kind of what are you planning? And maybe there's a sense of expectations there. Again, trying to plan and structure it as much as possible in terms of saying, this is the intent. We are grateful. Gratitude is a really tough thing, right, to find fault in. And then having the communication that you feel comfortable with is really, really important.
What are some of your tips for couples as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that we find with couples, and we actually just wrote a white paper about this called Prosperity and Partnerships, is that at the end of the day, we all have different money messages growing up. And exactly to your point, whether you're meeting maybe someone's family for the first time or you've been together for a long time, everybody has judgment and has different perspectives on it. So the one thing that we really advise couples to do is get on the same page in terms of how they're framing, whether it's a conversation about gifting or a request. Sometimes we have families tell us, we're talking about a loan or maybe a charitable gift, and there are different perspectives around it. So having, again, clarity of communications going into it and also being able to anticipate some of the questions and address them, or really just say, I'm happy to talk about this. Right, this is a nice holiday dinner. I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation so as not to dilute it. We found to be really, really helpful as well.
How can family members share tips about how to combat things like their credits, how to make sure that they're paying down different expenses and debts that they may have as well, and even a term that might get tossed around a lot and perhaps overused at the dinner table, inflation, especially as many people are, charting their way to get to a dinner table or know how much is going into paying for the dinner as well.
Right. And no, very valid. And I think, again, it goes back to intent and expectations. So for us, kind of money related conversations, and we were just kind of with the family, right, where the daughter and her husband were saying, I'm feeling a lot of judgment potentially from my parents when we talk about plans that we have. I think being able to distinguish between this is what we believe, these are our values, this is how we're choosing to make financial decisions, and mom and dad, in her case, I'm open to your advice on this element of it, right? So you are wiser, older, you've been through this. I would like your experience with maybe how to manage this versus telling us how to necessarily make financial decision is a really important distinction.
And to the extent that it's on the table for discussion, how should families be talking about or perhaps prepping the conversation for wealth transfer?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we hear consistently about wealth transfer is a lot of times from the parental standpoint or often wealth creator standpoint, there's a lot of fear or uncertainty about, I don't want to share too much, I don't want to impede motivation. And then we hear from the children, oftentimes young adults, I'm really uncertain of how to bring this up because I don't want to be interpreted as entitled. So for us, we really think about it as not a light switch of you have to share everything at once, but as a dimmer switch. So starting with what is the intent before getting to the structure in dollars is really important. And practically speaking, right, for parents, that could be saying, we've been doing a lot of planning. We know everyone's getting older. This is how we see success for our assets. Maybe it's to empower you, but also to give charitably. And likewise, from the rising generation or the children's perspective, really saying, I really want to understand what your wishes are, right? So I can carry out your intent and so I can make some planning decisions for my own life if there's some gifting or so forth that's going to impact.
Valerie Galinskaya.
So it's really, again, the focus on purpose that we found to be really critical.
Absolutely. Valerie Galinskaya, who is the head of the Merrill Center for Family Wealth. Thanks so much for taking the time here with us, Valerie.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.